Good day. I am LMAC Alphabeti, taking Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, major in Financial Management, second year. And I want to share many things that I learned from my business research subject. In prelim lessons, there are a lot of things that I have learned. I learned about what is research, what research is and not, characteristics of research, and the tools of research. Research is a very confusing term. It has so many meanings as it is commonly used that we must understand exactly what we mean when we use it in its scholarly sense. For me, as I read the lesson proper of the subject, I would say that research is the organized and systematic method of finding answers to questions. It is systematic because it is a process broken up into clear steps that lead to conclusions. Research is organized because there is a planned structure or method used to reach the conclusions. What research is not, unfortunately, many students have been misled into believing that research consists of looking up a few facts and writing them down in a well-documented paper. Of course, such work is nothing more than a fact-finding and a fact-transcribing. Even if the act of transportation is acknowledged by a footnote, no amount of information movement from one place to another can be dignified by the term research. What research is? Successful research begins with a proper orientation. It is essentially a way of thinking. It is a manner of regarding accumulated facts so that a collection of data becomes articulate to the mind of the researcher in terms of what those data mean and what those facts say. Characteristics of research. First is, research begins with a question in the mind of the researcher. It means that research begins with a questioning and inquisitive mind in the presence of baffling and perplexing fact. Next is research requires a plan. It means that research is an orderly procedure, planned and logical in design. Research demands a clear statement of the problem. It means that research should have a precise and grammatically complete statement of the problem setting forth exactly what the researcher seeks to discover. Next is research deals with the main problem through sub-problems. Most researchable problems have within them various other problem areas of lesser breadth and importance. Next is the tools of research. First is research seeks direction through appropriate hypothesis. When we say hypothesis, it is a logical supposition, a reasonable guess, an educated conjecture which may give direction to thinking with respect to the problem and thus aid in solving it. When you are faced with a problem for research, you make educated guesses to assist you in discovering the solution and in giving you direction in looking for the fact. Next is research deals with a fact and their meaning. It means collecting whatever facts seem to be pertinent to the problem and to organize them into meaningful aggregates capable of being interpreted. Last is research is circular. It means that research is a continuous process of checking and rechecking, evaluating and analyzing and repeating the entire process over and over again. In midterm lessons, I learned about sampling, types of sampling, the advantages and disadvantages of each sampling, and the data collection method. Sampling is a technique for obtaining information about the population based on the statistics from a portion of the population rather than having to investigate individually. We need sampling in order to draw conclusions about the populations from samples, and it enables us to determine a population's characteristics by directly observing only a portion of the population. There are several different sampling techniques available and they can be subdivided into two groups. First is probability sampling that involves random selection, allowing you to make statistical inferences about the whole group. There are four types of probability sampling techniques. First is simple random sampling. This is a type of sampling technique that you must have come across at some point. Here, every individual is chosen entirely by chance, and each member of the population has an equal chance of being selected. The advantages of this sampling are minimum sampling bias, as the samples are collected randomly. Selection of the samples is simple as random generators are used. The results can be generalized due to representativeness. While the disadvantages are The potential availability of all respondents can be costly and time-consuming. Larger sample sizes. Next is cluster sampling. In a clustered sample, the subgroups of the population as the sampling unit rather than individuals. The population is divided into subgroups known as clusters, and the whole cluster is randomly selected to be included in the study. The advantages of this sampling are saves time and money. It is very easy to use from the practical standpoint. Larger sample sizes can be used. While the disadvantages are high sampling error may fail to reflect the diversity in the sampling frame. Next is systematic sampling. In this type of sampling, the first individual is selected randomly and others are selected using a fixed sampling interval. The advantages of this sampling are cost and time efficient, spreads the sample more evenly over the population. While the disadvantages are complete population should be known, sample bias if there are periodic patterns within the dataset. Next is stratified random sampling. In this type of sampling, population is divided into subgroups called strata, based on different traits like gender, category, etc., and then select the samples from these subgroups. The advantages of this sampling are greater level of representation from all the groups. If there is homogeneity within strata and heterogeneity between strata, the estimates can be as accurate. While the disadvantages are requires the knowledge of strata membership, might take longer and more expensive. Complex methodology. The second technique of sampling is the non-probability sampling that involves non-random selection based on convenience or other criteria, allowing you to easily collect initial data. There are 4 types of non-probability sampling techniques. First is convenience sampling. This is perhaps the easiest method of sampling because individuals are selected based on their availability and willingness to take part. The advantages of this sampling are it is easy to get the sample, low cost, and participants are readily available. While the disadvantages are can't generalize the results, possibility of under or overrepresentation of the population, significant bias. Next is judgmental or purposive sampling. It is also known as selective sampling. It depends on the judgment of the experts when choosing whom to ask to participate. The advantages of this sampling are cost and time-effective sampling method, allows researchers to approach their target market directly, almost real-time results. While the disadvantages are vulnerability to errors in judgment by researcher, low level of reliability and high levels of bias, inability to generalize research findings. Next is snowball sampling. In this type of sampling, existing people are asked to nominate further people known to them so that the sample increases in size like a rolling snowball. This method of sampling is effective when the sampling frame is difficult to identify. The advantages of this sampling are researchers can reach rare subjects in a particular population, low cost and easy to implement. It doesn't require a recruitment team to recruit the additional subject. While the disadvantages are the sample may not be a representative, sampling bias may occur. Because the sample is likely to be biased, it can be hard to draw conclusions about the larger population with any confidence. Last is quota sampling. In this type of sampling, items are chosen based on predetermined characteristics of the population. The advantages of this sampling are cost-effective, doesn't depend on sampling frames, allows the researchers to sample a subgroup that is of great interest to the study. While the disadvantages are sample may be overrepresented, unable to calculate the sampling error, great potential for researcher bias, and the quality of work may suffer due to researcher incompetency and or lack of experience. Data collection method. In statistics, data collection is a process of gathering information from all the relevant sources to find a solution to the research problem. It helps to evaluate the outcome of the problem, and the data collection methods allow a person to conclude an answer to the relevant question. The data collection method is divided into two categories, namely primary data collection methods and the secondary data collection methods. Primary data or raw data is a type of information that is obtained directly from the first-hand source through experiments, surveys, or observations. The primary data collection method is further classified into two types. There are quantitative data collection methods that is based on mathematical calculations using various formats like close-ended questions, correlation, and regression methods, mean, median, or mode measures. Next is qualitative data collection methods. It does not involve any mathematical calculations. This method is closely associated with elements that are not quantifiable. This qualitative data collection method includes interviews, questionnaires, observations, case studies, etc. There are several methods to collect this type of data. They are observation method. Observation method is used when the study relates to behavioral science. This method is planned systematically. It is subject to many controls and checks. Next is interview method. The method of collecting data in terms of oral or verbal responses. It is achieved in two ways, such as personal interview or telephonic interview. Next is questionnaire method. In this method, the set of questions are mailed to the respondent. They should read, reply, and subsequently return the questionnaire. The questions are printed in definite order on the form. Next is schedules. This method is similar to the questionnaire method with a slight difference. The enumerations are specially appointed for the purpose of filling the schedules. It explains the aims and objects of the investigation and may remove misunderstandings if any have come up. Next is the secondary data, that is the data collected by someone other than actual user. It means that the information is already available and someone analyzes it. The secondary data includes magazine, newspapers, books, journals, etc. It may be either published data or unpublished data. Published data are available in various resources including government publications, public records, historical and statistical documents, business documents, technical and trade journals, while the unpublished data includes diaries, letters, unpublished biographies, and etc. For now, that's all I learned, and looking forward for more lessons, for more exciting lessons that I'm going to learn. Thank you!